The wind carried dust like whispers across the barren land, curling around the broken fences and tired wooden posts of what had once been a hopeful homestead. Eliza stood at the edge of it, her worn boots half buried in the dry earth, her hands clenched tightly in the faded fabric of her dress. Everything she had known, every laugh, every tear, every memory, seemed to dissolve into that restless wind. Behind her, the door creaked open. "Eliza," her father's voice called, rough and strained, like it had been dragged across gravel. "It's time. Time." The words struck her like a quiet hammer. Time to leave. Time to repay a debt she never created. Time to become something, or someone, she did not yet understand. She turned slowly, her chest tight. Her father stood in the doorway, older than she remembered, though only weeks had passed since the drought had swallowed their crops whole. His shoulders sagged beneath a burden no man should carry, and his eyes, once steady and warm, now avoided hers. "Do I have a choice?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. He hesitated, and in that silence, she found it. "No," he finally said, his voice breaking. "This is the only way." The words settled heavily between them. Not cruel, not careless, just final. A horse neighed somewhere in the distance. Eliza's gaze shifted past her father, beyond the broken fence line, where 3 riders waited. They were unlike anyone she had ever seen up close. Still, silent, watching. Apache. Her breath caught in her throat. Stories had filled her childhood, stories told in hushed tones by neighbors and travelers passing through. Stories of warriors who moved like shadows, who spoke little but saw everything, who belonged to the land in a way settlers never could. And now, she was being sent to live among them. Her stomach twisted. "Why them?" she whispered. Her father stepped forward, his boots crunching against the dirt. "Because they asked," he said quietly, "and because they offered enough to keep us alive." Alive. The word felt bitter. At what cost? Eliza swallowed hard, forcing her trembling hands to still. She would not cry. Not here. Not now. "I won't survive out there," she said, her voice barely steady. Her father reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before resting gently on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you think," he murmured. "And not all stories are true." She wanted to believe him, but fear had already rooted itself deep inside her. The riders began to move, slowly, deliberately. The sound of hooves against dry earth echoed louder with every step closer, until it filled the air like a steady drumbeat. Eliza's pulse matched it, fast and unrelenting. When they finally stopped just a few feet away, the world seemed to hold its breath. The man at the front dismounted first. He moved with a quiet confidence, his presence commanding without effort. Taller than she expected, broad-shouldered, his expression unreadable. His dark hair was tied back, and his eyes, sharp, steady, unyielding, locked onto hers. Eliza felt as though he could see straight through her. This was Takoda. Though no one had spoken his name yet, she knew. There was something about him, something grounded, something immovable, that made the earth itself feel steadier beneath his feet. And yet, it terrified her. He said nothing at first, just stood there, studying her, as if measuring something deeper than appearance. Eliza forced herself not to look away. She would not appear weak. Not in front of him, not in front of anyone. Finally, Takoda spoke. "She will come with us." His voice was low, calm, and certain. Not a question, not a demand, but a simple truth. Her father nodded, though his hand tightened slightly on Eliza's shoulder before falling away completely. It was done. Just like that. No ceremony, no farewell speech, no moment to gather what little remained of her courage. Eliza stepped forward, her legs feeling heavier with each movement. She didn't dare look back again. If she did, she knew she wouldn't be able to leave. One of the other riders handed Takoda the reins of an extra horse. He gestured toward it. "You ride," he said. 2 simple words. No harshness, no kindness, just expectation. Eliza hesitated for only a moment before climbing onto the horse. Her fingers tightened around the reins, knuckles pale against the leather. Takoda mounted his own horse with ease, his movements fluid, practiced. Then, without another word, they turned and began to ride. The homestead disappeared behind them faster than she expected. The broken fences, the small wooden house, the life she had known, it all faded into the horizon until it became nothing more than a memory swallowed by dust. The land ahead stretched endlessly, wild, unforgiving, unknown. Eliza's heart pounded in her chest as the silence between them grew heavier. No one spoke. No one explained. The only sounds were the wind and the steady rhythm of hooves against earth. She risked a glance at Takoda. He rode slightly ahead, his posture straight, his gaze fixed forward. Unshaken, untouchable, a stranger. And yet, the man who now held the path of her future. Fear tightened its grip again. Where was he taking her? What did he expect from her? And most of all, what kind of life awaited her among people she had been taught her entire life to fear? The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the land in shades of gold and shadow. Eliza drew in a slow, shaky breath. There was no turning back now, only forward, into silence, into uncertainty, into a world she did not yet understand, and somewhere ahead, into the life of the man who had not even asked for her name. The sun had nearly disappeared when they finally stopped. The land around them had changed without warning, flat plains giving way to scattered rock formations and low, wind-carved hills. It felt less like civilization and more like the earth itself had forgotten how to be soft here. Eliza slid down from her horse slowly, her legs stiff from the long ride. Dust clung to her dress, her hair, her skin. Everything about her felt out of place in this world, as if she had been dropped from another life entirely. The Apache camp was already stirring ahead. Fires burned in shallow pits, sending thin ribbons of smoke into the evening sky. Shapes moved around them, figures speaking in low voices, carrying supplies, tending to horses. Children darted between tents made of hides and wood. Life continued here with a rhythm she did not yet understand. Eliza's stomach tightened. This was not a place built for her. This was a place she had been brought into. Takoda dismounted without urgency. He tied his horse first, then approached her. His movements were calm, controlled, never wasted, never hurried. "You will stay here," he said. Eliza's eyes flicked around nervously. "Where?" He gestured toward a small shelter, slightly apart from the others. It was simple, too simple. A frame of wood covered with hides, positioned near a larger fire, but still separated from the cluster of activity. "A place of your own," he added. Her brows tightened. "Why separate me?" For the first time, something subtle shifted in his expression. Not anger, not irritation, but patience, as if he expected the question long before she asked it. "Because you are not yet part of us," he said. The words stung more than she expected. Not yet part of us, as if she might never be. Eliza hugged her arms around herself. The wind here felt colder, sharper. "And what am I then?" she asked quietly. Takoda studied her for a moment, a long moment. "You are here," he said finally. "That is enough for now. Not comforting, not cruel, just final." He turned slightly, as if to leave, but Eliza's voice stopped him. "That's it?" she said, frustration breaking through her fear. "No explanation? No rules? I was taken from everything I know, and all you can say is you are here?" Some of the nearby voices quieted. A few people glanced in their direction. Takoda didn't react to the attention. He stepped closer instead. Not aggressively, not threateningly, but close enough that Eliza instinctively took a half step back. His eyes held hers. "You think you were taken," he said quietly. Her breath caught. "I wasn't?" A pause. Then, softer than before, "You were brought." The distinction unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Takoda continued, his voice steady. "You were not chained. You were not dragged. You came because your world could not keep you." Eliza's throat tightened. That was true, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel heavier. He looked toward the camp, where firelight flickered across moving silhouettes. "This place is not like yours," he said. "Here, words mean what they are, not what you wish them to be." "And what does that mean for me?" Takoda turned his gaze back to her. For a brief moment, something unreadable passed through his expression, something deeper than logic or duty. Then he spoke the words that would stay with her longer than anything else that night. "You'll open to me again and again until our child stirs beneath your heart." Silence fell instantly. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Eliza froze. Her mind struggled to catch up, to place meaning onto what she had just heard. Open to him, again and again, until a child? Her face flushed with shock, anger rising immediately to cover confusion. "What did you just say?" she demanded, her voice sharper than intended. Takoda did not raise his voice, did not step back. He simply watched her reaction, as if it were expected. Eliza's heart pounded. I will not be spoken to like that. I don't know what kind of man you think you are, but I am not some possession you can—" "Stop," he said calmly. One word, not loud, but firm enough that it cut through her rising panic. Eliza fell silent, breathing unevenly. Takoda's expression did not change, but his tone softened slightly. "You misunderstand," he said. "Then explain it," she snapped, still shaken. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he turned slightly toward the firelight, as if choosing his words carefully. "What I said is not force," he explained. "It is not command. It is not now." Eliza's eyes narrowed, still guarded. "Time, I believe, will come." She didn't understand him. Or maybe she didn't want to. Takoda looked back at her. "You do not trust me," he said simply. "That is the first truth." Eliza didn't answer. Because it was true. He nodded once, as if accepting that silence as confirmation. "Then we begin there," he said, and with that he turned away. Eliza stood alone, beside the unfamiliar shelter, as night settled fully over the camp. The firelight flickered around her, casting long shadows that danced across the ground like restless thoughts. People moved nearby, speaking softly, living their lives as if she were already part of their world, or already expected to become part of it. But she did not feel part of anything, not yet. She replayed his words again and again in her mind. "You will open to me again and again." It did not sound like cruelty, but it did not sound like freedom either. It sounded like certainty. And certainty, in a place like this, frightened her more than anything else. Above her, the stars began to appear, cold, distant, unblinking. And beneath them, Eliza realized one thing with uneasy clarity. Her life was no longer her own rhythm. It had already begun to move to someone else's. Morning arrived without softness. The desert did not wake gently. It revealed itself all at once. Sharp light poured over the camp, exposing every detail Eliza had tried to ignore the night before. The smell of smoke still lingered in the air, mixed with earth and leather, and something wild she could not name. Eliza sat outside the small shelter Takoda had assigned her. She hadn't slept much. Every sound in the night had felt unfamiliar. Footsteps passing nearby, distant voices, the crackle of dying fires. Each one had reminded her she was not home. She wrapped her arms around herself, watching the camp begin to move. People rose with purpose. No chaos, no confusion. Even the children seemed to understand their place in the rhythm of the morning. Horses were led out. Water was carried. Fires were rebuilt. Everything had meaning here. Everything except her. She felt like a shadow that had not yet learned where it belonged. A figure approached. Eliza stiffened immediately. Takoda. He moved through the camp with the same quiet control as before, acknowledging others with small gestures, but never breaking his steady pace. When he reached her, he stopped. "You did not sleep," he said simply. It was not a question. Eliza looked away. "It doesn't matter." Takoda studied her for a moment, then turned slightly and placed a small bundle on a flat stone beside her shelter. Bread, dried meat, a small container of water. Her eyes narrowed. "Is this supposed to make me feel safe?" "It is food," he replied. "That's not what I asked." He didn't react to her tone. Instead, he crouched slightly near the fire pit, adjusting a few embers, as if it mattered more than her suspicion. "You are far from your land," he said calmly. "Your body still needs strength. So you're caring for me now?" A pause. Then Takoda answered, steady as ever. "I am not letting you weaken." The words should have sounded harsh, but they didn't. There was no pride in them, no control, only practicality. Eliza watched him carefully. Every instinct she had expected cruelty, dominance, demand. But what she was seeing did not match the stories she had been told her entire life. Still, she wasn't ready to trust it. "Why am I here, really?" she asked quietly. "You say I wasn't taken, but I didn't choose this either." Takoda stood slowly. Around them, the camp continued its life, but his focus remained on her. "You were not chosen as property," he said. "You were chosen as presence." Eliza frowned. "That makes no sense." "It does here." She shook her head slightly. "Nothing about this place makes sense." For the first time, something faint, almost like understanding, crossed his face. "That is because you are still outside it," he said. Before she could respond, a commotion rose nearby. A horse had thrown a rider during training practice. Voices lifted, urgent but controlled. A young man lay on the ground, gripping his shoulder. Eliza flinched instinctively. People rushed toward him, but Takoda moved first. He reached the fallen rider quickly, kneeling beside him. He checked the man's arm with practiced hands, speaking in a low, steady voice. Others gathered, watching. Eliza hesitated, then followed at a distance. She had never seen him like this, focused, efficient, entirely present. He wasn't harsh. He wasn't detached. He was responsible in a way that felt deeply rooted. The injured man groaned. Takoda placed a hand on his shoulder, speaking softly in his language. The tone was calm, grounding. Within moments, the panic in the young man's breathing eased. Eliza noticed that. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the effect. Control through calm, not fear. When the situation stabilized, Takoda helped the man up and signaled for others to assist him back to a tent. Only then did he glance toward Eliza. "You should not stand so far," he said. "I didn't know what to do," she admitted before she could stop herself. Takoda nodded once. "You watch first, then you learn." Something about that sentence unsettled her more than she expected. Not because it was demanding, but because it assumed she would still be here long enough to learn anything. Later that day, he showed her small things without explanation. Where to find clean water, which plants were safe to touch near the camp, how to recognize the rhythm of movement in the herd of horses so she wouldn't startle them. He never said, "You must." He never said, "You should." He simply demonstrated, then moved on. Eliza followed reluctantly at first, then with growing attention. She noticed how no one in the camp seemed afraid of each other. There was structure, yes, but not the kind she had imagined. It was not built on threat. It was built on understanding. Still, she kept her distance from Takoda, because every time she looked at him too long, she remembered his words from the night before. "You'll open to me again and again," and she still didn't know what that meant. As the sun lowered in the sky, casting long shadows across the camp, Eliza found herself sitting near the fire again. This time, she did not move away when Takoda approached. He sat a short distance from her, not invading her space. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Eliza broke the silence. "You don't treat me like the others expected you to," she said. Takoda glanced at her. "And what did you expect?" he asked. She hesitated. Cruelty, she thought. Possession. Fear. But none of those words felt right anymore. "I don't know," she admitted. Takoda looked back toward the fire. "Then you are already changing your expectations," he said. Eliza didn't respond, but something inside her shifted quietly. Small, uncertain, but real. Not trust, not yet, but confusion breaking the shape of fear. And in that fragile space, something unfamiliar began to grow. Understanding. The storm came without warning. By late afternoon, the sky had changed its mind. What had been a calm stretch of pale blue turned into a heavy, bruised gray that pressed down on the camp like a warning. The wind rose first, low and restless, then sharper, until it cut through the valley with a voice of its own. Eliza noticed how quickly everything shifted. People moved with urgency now, not panic, but practiced response. Fires were shielded, supplies tied down, animals guided into safer ground. There was no chaos, only coordination shaped by experience. She stood near her shelter, uncertain where she was supposed to be. No one told her. That, more than anything, unsettled her. A sudden gust hit hard enough to shake the structure beside her. Eliza flinched, stepping back instinctively. The wind carried dust and cold in the same breath, stinging her eyes. And then she saw him. Takoda. He was moving across the camp, securing ropes, speaking briefly to others, checking structures with sharp efficiency. He wasn't rushed, but he was everywhere at once, as if the storm itself was something he had already met before. Eliza hesitated, then followed at a distance. She didn't know why. Maybe because standing alone felt worse than standing near him. A crack of thunder rolled across the sky. The wind surged harder. One of the smaller shelters near the edge of camp began to loosen, its bindings straining under pressure. A young woman called out, struggling to hold it steady. Takoda was already there. He moved in without hesitation, tightening the lashings with strong, practiced hands. Eliza stopped a few steps away, watching. Another gust hit, strong enough to bend the structure. Without thinking, Eliza rushed forward and grabbed the edge of the frame, bracing it with her body. The wood pressed painfully into her palms. Takoda looked at her, just for a moment. Then, instead of telling her to move away, he adjusted his position so their efforts aligned. He secured the opposite side, while she held firm. They worked in silence. The storm roared louder around them. For a brief stretch of time, there was no fear, only motion, survival, and the shared pressure of something larger than both of them. When the shelter finally held, Eliza stepped back, breathing hard. Her hands were shaking. She realized she hadn't been ordered. She had simply acted. Takoda studied her for a moment. "You stayed," he said. It wasn't praise, just observation. Eliza swallowed. "I didn't think I should stand back." A faint pause. "You thought for yourself," he said. That simple sentence unsettled her more than the storm, because no one in her previous life had ever said that to her in a way that mattered. Another thunderclap rolled through the valley, closer now. Takoda gestured toward a larger structure at the center of camp. "Come." Eliza hesitated only briefly before following. Inside the larger shelter, The wind was muffled, but still present, like a distant animal circling outside. Several people gathered there, tending to supplies, checking injuries, speaking in low tones. The atmosphere was tense, but not fearful. Takoda spoke briefly with two elders, before turning back toward Eliza. "You are safe here," he said. Eliza frowned slightly. "How can you be sure?" He glanced toward the entrance, where the storm still howled. "Because we prepared," he said simply. There was no arrogance in it, only certainty built from repetition and experience. Eliza sat near the edge of the shelter, pulling her knees slightly toward her chest. Her hair was damp now, from stray rain that had begun to slip through gaps in the structure. Takoda remained standing nearby, watching the movement outside. After a long silence, Eliza spoke quietly. "Why did you say it?" she asked. Takoda didn't look at her. "Say what?" Her throat tightened slightly. "You'll open to me again and again until our child stirs beneath your heart." The words felt heavier in her mouth now than they had the first time. Outside, the wind pressed harder against the shelter. Takoda was silent for a moment longer than before. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower. "You still carry it as if it is a chain." Eliza's eyes narrowed slightly. "What else would I carry it as?" He turned toward her then, not sharply, not aggressively, just fully. "As a path," he said. Eliza frowned. "A path to what?" Takoda studied her for a moment, as if deciding how much of an answer she was ready for. "To trust," he said. Her breath caught slightly. "That doesn't explain anything," she replied. "It is not meant to be understood in a day," he said, "or a season." Eliza looked away, frustrated and confused. "You speak like you already know what I will become," she said. Takoda didn't deny it. "I observe," he said. "I do not force." A quiet tension settled between them. Outside, the storm reached its peak. Rain now struck the earth in heavy sheets, and the wind screamed through the valley like something alive. Inside, everything felt suspended. Eliza's voice softened, though she didn't intend it to. "You don't act like the men I was told about," she admitted. Takoda glanced at her briefly. "And what were you told?" he asked. She hesitated. "That they were cruel, that they took what they wanted, that they did not wait." She didn't say any of it. Instead she said, "That I should fear you." A long pause followed. Then Takoda spoke quietly. "Fear is easy," he said. "Understanding takes longer." Eliza looked at him then, really looked at him. Not as a stranger, not as a threat, but as something she still could not name. Outside, the storm continued. Inside, something else had begun to shift, quietly, almost invisibly. Not trust, not yet, but the first small crack in something she had built to survive. The days after the storm carried a strange stillness. The air was cleaner now, washed by rain that had briefly softened the harsh land. But the camp did not relax. If anything, it became more alert, more watchful, as if the storm had reminded everyone how quickly peace could be taken away. Eliza noticed the change immediately. People moved with quiet efficiency again. But now there was something sharper in their eyes. Preparation, awareness, a readiness she hadn't seen before. And Takoda was at the center of it. Always. Eliza had begun to notice that too. She didn't mean to watch him so often, but it was difficult not to. He didn't behave like the men she had known in stories, or even in memory. He didn't waste words. He didn't seek attention, yet people naturally turned toward him when decisions were needed. Not because he demanded it, because he carried it. One morning, the camp gathered near the edge of the valley. Eliza followed at a distance, unsure why she was included, or if she even was. But no one stopped her. That alone felt different now. Takoda stood with a few elders, speaking in a low tone. His expression was serious, his posture still. Around them the atmosphere tightened. Something was wrong. A scout had returned. Eliza caught fragments of the conversation, words about riders seen near the outer ridges, unfamiliar tracks, tension near trade routes. The tone was controlled, but heavy. When the meeting ended, Takoda turned and saw her standing slightly apart. For a moment he simply observed her. Then he walked toward her. "You heard," he said. Eliza hesitated. "Enough to know something is coming." He nodded once. "Yes." Her chest tightened slightly. "Is it dangerous?" Takoda didn't answer immediately. That alone told her more than she wanted to know. Finally, he said, "It can be." Eliza looked away, swallowing hard. "And you're not afraid?" It wasn't a question. Takoda's gaze remained steady. "Fear does not prevent danger," he said. "Preparation does." Eliza frowned slightly. "That's not an answer." "It is the only one that matters here." Before she could respond, a loud shout came from the edge of camp. Movement. Confusion. Eliza turned sharply. A group of riders had appeared on the ridge, distant but visible. Not part of the camp, not welcomed. The atmosphere shifted instantly. People began moving into positions without panic, but with purpose. Takoda didn't rush. He simply said, "Stay behind me." The words were calm. But this time, Eliza did not argue. That realization surprised her more than the situation itself. She followed him toward the center of the camp, as tension rose around them. Warriors took positions. Horses were moved. Children were guided into shelters. Eliza's heartbeat grew louder with every step. The riders on the ridge did not descend. They watched, waiting, testing. Takoda stood at the front line, unmoving. Eliza stayed a few steps behind him, her hands clenched tightly. One of the elders spoke beside Takoda. The exchange was brief, but sharp. Eliza couldn't understand the words, but she could feel the weight behind them. Then Takoda stepped forward, just slightly, a signal, not aggression, control. The riders on the ridge shifted, then slowly turned away. No confrontation, no clash. Just retreat. As quickly as they had appeared, they were gone. Silence followed. The camp did not celebrate. It simply exhaled. Eliza realized something then. This wasn't a life of chaos or violence like she had once imagined. It was constant negotiation with uncertainty. Takoda finally relaxed his stance, though only slightly. When he turned, he found Eliza still standing there, watching the empty ridge. "You are shaking," he said. Only then did she notice. Her hands were trembling. "I didn't realize how close it felt," she admitted quietly. Takoda studied her for a moment. Then, instead of walking away, he removed his outer wrap and placed it over her shoulders. The gesture was simple, but it stunned her more than anything he had ever said. Eliza looked up at him, confused. "Why?" she asked. "Cold, slow thought," he said. "You think too much already." A faint breath escaped her, almost a laugh, but not quite. "You make it sound like a problem," she said. "It is," he replied, without harshness. But there was something different in his tone now, less distance, more recognition. As the camp settled again, Eliza remained standing near him. The fabric around her shoulders carried his warmth. She should have felt uncomfortable. She should have rejected it. Instead, she held it tighter. Later that evening, the firelight stretched across the camp in long, flickering shadows. Eliza sat near it again, but this time she did not sit far from Takoda. He was sharpening a tool quietly beside her. The sound was steady, repetitive, grounding. After a long silence, Eliza spoke. "Today I thought I understood what fear was," she said. Takoda didn't look up. "And now?" She hesitated. "Now I think I only knew the idea of it." A pause. Takoda set the tool down briefly. "That is progress," he said. Eliza glanced at him. "Is that what you call it?" "Yes." She looked down at her hands. "I don't know what I am becoming here," she admitted quietly. Takoda finally looked at her. This time his gaze lingered longer than usual. "Someone who sees clearly," he said. Eliza frowned slightly. Or someone who belongs nowhere? Takoda shook his head once. Belonging is not given, he said. It is built. A quiet silence settled between them, different from before. Less tense, more uncertain in a new way. Eliza stared into the fire. She didn't trust him yet, but something dangerous was beginning to form beneath that resistance. Not fear, not confusion, something far more complicated. The beginning of attachment she had not agreed to feel. Winter arrived quietly, not with dramatic storms or sudden change, but with a slow surrender of the land. The wind grew colder. The nights stretched longer. Even the colors of the valley seemed to fade, as if the earth itself was conserving what little warmth it had left. It doesn't feel as harsh anymore. He glanced at her. Because you have changed. She let out a quiet breath, watching the snow gather on her sleeves. Or because I've stopped fighting everything. Takoda didn't respond immediately. That silence between them had become something different over time. Not emptiness, but space. Space where thoughts were allowed to exist without immediate reaction. Finally, he said, fighting was never required. Eliza looked at him briefly. It felt like it was. Takoda turned his gaze toward the valley. It is what you knew, he said, so you carried it here. Eliza considered that. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then she asked quietly, Do you remember what you said to me when I first arrived? Takoda did not need to ask what she meant. I remember. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of her shawl. I didn't understand it then. A pause. And now, he asked? Eliza hesitated. The words had lived inside her longer than she wanted to admit. At first they had felt like a threat, then like confusion, then like something she needed to resist in order to remain herself. But time had changed how they echoed in her mind. I think I understand pieces of it, she admitted. Takoda looked at her, waiting. Eliza swallowed slightly. You are not speaking about force, she said slowly, or ownership. You are speaking as if something would grow between us. Slowly, whether I understood it or not. The wind shifted gently around them. Takoda nodded once. Yes. Eliza looked away again, her breath visible in the cold air. That still doesn't explain everything, she said. It was never meant to explain everything, he said. She frowned slightly. Then what was it meant to be? Takoda was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower than before. A truth I believed would unfold with time. Eliza turned toward him. And did it? She asked. Takoda met her gaze. For the first time there was something unmistakably present in his expression, something steady, but no longer distant. You are still here, he said. It was not an answer, but it was not avoidance either. Eliza let out a soft breath, almost a laugh, but gentler. I used to think that meant I had no choice, she said. Takoda studied her. And now? She hesitated. Now I think I stayed in ways I didn't notice. Silence settled again, but it was not heavy anymore. It was quiet in a different way. A shared quiet. From deeper in the camp, voices called out softly. Routine. But here, at the edge, time felt slightly suspended. Eliza finally spoke again, her voice softer. If I asked you what I am to you now, she said, would you answer differently than before? Takoda didn't respond immediately. When he did, it was simple. You are not what you were when you arrived, he said. That's not an answer, she replied. It is the only honest one. Eliza looked down, absorbing that. The snow continued falling around them, dusting the world in silence. After a long moment, she spoke again. I don't feel like I belong anywhere I can explain, she admitted. Takoda looked at her quietly. Belonging does not begin with explanation, he said. She glanced at him. Then what does it begin with? He didn't look away this time. Presence, he said. Choice and time. Eliza stood still for a long moment, letting those words settle. They did not erase her uncertainty, but they no longer felt like a cage either. For the first time, she did not step back from him. She simply stayed where she was. The snow fell between them, soft and endless. And in that silence, something that had been forming for a long time finally became undeniable. Not spoken, not declared, but present. Not ownership, not fear. Something closer to understanding that had survived everything it was not meant to survive. Eliza exhaled slowly. "I think I finally understand your promise," she said quietly. Takoda watched her. "And what is it?" he asked. She looked out over the valley, then back at him. "That you believed I would change. Not because I was forced to, but because I would choose to see differently." Takoda did not answer right away, but his silence this time felt like agreement. Eliza tightened her shawl slightly, feeling the cold, but not retreating from it. "I don't know what comes next," she said. Takoda's voice was calm. "Neither do I," he said. A faint pause, then quieter. "But we are here." And for the first time since she arrived, Eliza understood that here was no longer a place she had been taken to. It was a place she had reached, step by uncertain step.